Okay, let's get this thing going. As long as I can find the dry erase marker. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for coming out for Smallmouth Saturday today. Last seminar of the day. I know a lot of you people I've seen in here the whole day long enjoying these seminars on the shelf. And we thank you very much for attending. And it's basically one of our theme shows that we put together a few years ago to talk about probably one of the top 3 smallmouth fisheries in the U.S., Susquehanna River. Most of the speakers that we had brought for you today are, long-time experienced guides on the river, and, they're dropping some insight and some knowledge, some tricks of the trades, as I like to call them. And I'm just hoping I can keep up with the pace they set and talk to you about basically fall and winter. Fall and winter. I know the other guys covered, ice out through the spawn, post-spawn blues, the summer loving. I'm going to roll at you with the fall and the winter. And I got some location, some techniques, some pointers that I think will help you to have your best ever fall and winter smallie fishing on the Susquehanna. I guess the most important thing we have to do is define the seasons. What is the fall? It's not September 21st as the calendar says. That's still a full-on summer pattern 9 times out of 10. The fall is when you start to notice, and a good rule of thumb would be like 65-degree water temps, consistent, and the first major cold front that comes blowing down out of the north with those big northeast winds and high pressure following it. When those two things coincide, you can officially call the fall. However, if you back up a little bit and you start paying attention with your eyes while you're fishing, you're liable to see fall behavior in fish during the whole month of September. And what I mean by that is if you're fishing down a shoreline or a grass bed or just doing your thing and you hear something because you're listening, you might look back and see 4 or 5 fish schooled up on some bait. That's some fall-like behavior. So you want to be paying attention, even though it's September and it's not really fall. You kind of get a little bit of a fall-like behavior going on sometimes. This year, of course, we didn't because we had extremely high water. We really didn't have anything close to what I'm going to be talking to you about. We had a fall, but we fished it like it was spring. As far as reacting to the conditions, we had some of the best fishing we've had in years under some of the worst conditions that we've had in years. And the fish never really acted much like fall because where they would like to be, which is on the big open flats, there was a raging current. And they were forced to hide, so to speak. And everything that they liked to eat was forced to hide where they were. So they figured, hey, why leave the groceries, right? So, you got to kind of deal with the conditions at hand, which is a good point. Water.weather.gov brings up the National Geographic, geologic river sites, rivers, streams. That should be the first thing that you do when you and your buddy are planning your fishing trip, is look at that. What is the river doing? What is it going to do? What are the predictions? Because it is a river and it does change every 12 hours, you need to kind of have that information at hand. While you're on their site, pull up the weather for the part of the river where you're going to be fishing, Duncannon, Lancaster, Harrisburg, wherever that is, get an idea on what the weather is. What's it doing? You know, in the fall, late fall and winter, the 3-day trends are really important. Stable to improving conditions. So you want to get your information. You can do that while you're at work, sitting at your desk, you know, thinking about fishing. You can pull up all these sites and plan your fishing trip, call your buddy up, and all that good stuff. So what I do in the fall is I start basically looking, and I'm looking for bait. So what you're going to have happening is you're going to have, depending on which area of the river you're at, you're going to have shad starting to migrate. Several years ago, they restarted. They brought back to life their shad stocking program. That is blueback herring and American shad and hickory shad being trucked way up the river every spring and released to try to reestablish the shad population in the Susquehanna River, because the dams have ruined that. And they did that for years. And for years, in the fall of the year, you know, we had great big fish targeting great big shad, and we caught them on great big lures. And then they built the shad lifts, stopped trucking them, and there are a couple $100 million worth of shad lifts that all don't work, prevented that from happening anymore. So the chain was broken, and our fall fishing reverted back to the same fish behavior, but targeting gizzard shad and river minnows of every type of description, which are like that big. So our lure selection shrank back down a little bit. Still caught the same number of fish. We just caught them on different baits. Well, now that they've started this, and they've been doing this now for several years, you can actually see and find these shad migrating back down the river, and it's like the Pied Piper. I mean, a little group of shad that big will have a giant group of smallmouth that are giant following them, and you'll start to run into that, you know, at the end of September, the beginning of October, and it's something that it's a needle in a haystack, but it's something you really want to find, because the fishing is absolutely epic. You know, 18 to 20 inch plus fish, schooled up. You catch one, you can't get your lure back in the water fast enough to catch another one. 4, 5, 6 fish later, the school kind of scatters on you. You rotate to find another school, rotate, find another school, rotate back around, and I mean, you just had an epic 2 at a time. You know, all big baits. All big baits. You know, the very early fall, we're throwing topwaters. That would be the smallest that we would use, and we would go up from there. So we're throwing, you know, a variety of walking baits, which are very good shad imitators, from you know, that style to all the other different brands. We fish a lot of mega bass. We fish a lot of Lucky Craft Sammies. I'm sure these guys talk to you about topwaters till you're blue in the face. The fluke, and again, I'm sure all these guys talk to you about the fluke, because this is something that you should have tied on from, you know, May to November on a spinning rod, ready to go. Now the fluke, I kind of call him my cleanup bait when I'm fishing these schools, because I have a progression that I use on fish. Whether it's a school that's feeding on shad, or whether it's a submerged deeper school of fish that I'm finding in a different season, or even if it's a winter school. I have a progression that goes with the most aggressive bait to the least aggressive bait. And every time I make that bait switch, I can ignite that school again. And I've fired schools up on more than one occasion and caught them off of one school for an hour straight. Just by dropping. I'd start with my most aggressive search bait in the fall. This rod right here never has anything else tied on it from, I don't know, the middle of September until the water freezes. It has a Spro Uruku shad tied on it. 99% of the time. There are a few other lipless baits that I use. These baits do two things for me. My most aggressive formula that I'm explaining to you, it doesn't get much more aggressive than this in 3 foot of water. When you can feel that right back through your rod tip. Okay? You're igniting a feeding frenzy. And more than once, I've caught a 4-pounder on each one of them hooks on the same cast by firing those fish up. More than once.
Is that a special color?
There's a couple colors that I use. That's a great question. Gentleman asked about if this is a special color. This is a special color. This is called perch. I don't use it because it's called perch. I use it because it has some gold in it, some silver in it, and an olive back. And if you ever get the opportunity to see these bigger shad and herring that I'm referring to that are migrating back down the river, they're a darker back with a shinier belly, and depending on how the light hits them, you see all those colors from olive to gray to gold. I'm not a total match the hatch, paint by color, paint by numbers color guy, but I like to get close in a situation like that. And again, we're talking about clear water here. You know, topwaters, lipless baits. You know, we're talking about clearer water. Now, this bait with the rattle obviously will work in dirtier water also, but a lot of your fall schooling fish are more clear water oriented. That's an Uruku. I fish the perch. I fish the wild shiner. In the dirtier water, I fish the magic tiger. And you know, I don't carry a ton of colors. But I carry a lot of lipless baits. There's 3/4 pound of them. But there's not that many colors in there. I've got some reds. These really don't see duty unless it's real muddy. I've got my wild shiners, my perch. We're going to come back to this box. We're going to get into some of these other colors and some of these other techniques when I start talking to you all about yo-yoing. Now that's a lot of fun. So we're searching. Lipless, topwater. We got our cleanup batter, the fluke. Shallow water, we're rigging him hook only. Okay? 3-0. I got a little something I want to tell you about hooking a fluke up. 3-0, wide gap, EWG, what have you. This is a standard kind of a wide gap hook. This is a Hayabusa. I fish a lot of Gamakatsu. This is a Hayabusa. I really like this hook. It's just like, it's surgical. So, we're going to rig this fluke up here for just a second. Now, I'm going to fish this on a spinning rod. I'm not telling you not to fish it on a casting rod. As a matter of fact, one of the best fluke fishermen I ever fished with, and I fished with this guy for years, fished it only on a bait casting rod. To each his own. I like to fish it on a spinning rod, and I like to fish it on a long spinning rod. My spinning rod of choice for this is what's called an 852 Loomis. I like the NRX rods because they're very, very light. And when I'm bouncing bottom, they are ridiculously sensitive. All I do is fish. I fish year-round. I fish every week of the year with the exception of when the water's frozen. So I do spend a ridiculous amount of money on my tackle. So, I mean, you don't have to have an NRX. I'm just telling you what I like. It's like what I do. It's all I do. I don't do anything else ever except for fish. So I go top shelf on my gear. But I use this rod for a lot of purposes. And the reason I like it, it's a longer rod. I can cast this fluke with no weight at all a ridiculous distance on that spinning rod with 8-pound fluorocarbon. I regularly casting at 105 feet. Regularly. I'm loading the rod. I'm using correct technique. No arm, all wrist. Loading the rod. getting that cast out there. And I only ever fish a fluke on fluorocarbon or braid with a fluorocarbon leader. I don't ever fish a fluke on any other type of line. What happens with a fluke is, if there's any kind of wind or current, it wants to come up on you. And that fluorocarbon helps keep that down a little bit. Now keep in mind, I'm fishing shallow still, early fall. And keep in mind with the fluke, the fall is the trigger. Okay, so fire that fluke out there, let it sink for a second. Doop, doop. Now, did anybody in this room notice what I just did there? I twitched that bait a very specific way. There's only one way to work a fluke or a jerkbait, and one way only. That's pop it, recoil back to where you started, pop it again, recoil back to where you started. That rod should never leave being in front of you. If you're working your baits like this when you're jerkbaiting or fluking, you are working them incorrectly. I want this bait to do this. Pop, pop, and just wander its way back down like that, which it'll do with a belly weight. I mean a belly hook. So cast it, let it sink, boom, boom. If you're doing this, if your rod is 7 foot 2 inches and you move your 7 foot 2 inches from here to here, I'm pretty sure you move that bait about 7 foot 2 inches. I want to move it about 2 inches. Tunk, tunk. Just think of that. Driving nails. Boom, 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 boom. And the trigger is the fall. That thing will leave the slack in the line. Pop, pop, don't reel. Watch the slack. Where the slack is sinking, watch that slack. That slack will do this. He just ate it. The next tap you feel is him spitting it out. The third tap you feel, I'm tapping you on the shoulder, telling you should have hit him on the first tap. Okay? That's the 3 tap rule. I guided for a lot of years on the river, and I used to be on the trolling motor with one client here and one client there, and I'd be like, working that throw, you're fishing here, you're doing that. You gonna set the hook in that fish? Okay, now we're doing this over here. What do you? No, go ahead, set the hook. You got them. You know, watch your line. You don't always feel them. Become a line watcher. If you can't see your line, what can you do? Anybody? Maybe put on a brighter line.
Right.
Chartreuse screen.
You can also mark it up with a marker.
Yeah, color it up. Okay, that's spooled with chartreuse green for a reason, to be able to see it. Now it has a 10-foot leader on it, so the fish don't. But that's another really helpful technique for spinning rod fishing. If you're having problems feeling anything, okay, I always tell people, be honest with yourself. If you can't feel the bottom because it's blowing 25 miles an hour and your buddy is wearing you out, and you don't want to admit to him that the same size jig head he's using you can't feel the bottom with, and he just put another fish, put a heavier jig head on. You know, be honest to yourself. Feel the bottom. Be honest to yourself. Watch your line. Be honest to yourself. You're going to catch more fish. Okay? So that's a little sidebar on that. So the fluke, and that leads me into another, probably the greatest ever fall lure, is the jerkbait. Now, what the jerkbait will do for you is the jerkbait will help you find fish, but the jerkbait will also produce some of the biggest fish in that school. The jerkbait is a hard version of the fluke. We're only going to fish suspending jerkbaits in the fall and the early winter. Okay? We're going to fish them specifically with that technique that I discussed with you. That's the way you catch fish on jerkbaits. If you want to not catch fish, keep doing it the other way. All right? Very important that we drop our line size down. This is a 10. All right? Now, on the upper river, a lot of times we're fishing some shallow water. You know, if this fluorocarbon is going to cause you to dive a little deeper. If you're in some shallow water situations, it's okay to fish a little mono instead of fluoro, or it's okay to work the bait upwards. Nothing changed. We just took the rod from down to up. Okay? 10-pound fluoro is my go-to. I shortened. This is the only under 7 foot, under 6'8" rod I carry. It's a 6'6". I only use it for jerkbait fishing, primarily. There's a few other things I do with it that aren't germane to this conversation. But this, in my opinion, is the greatest jerkbait rod ever made. It's not, doesn't say jerkbait anywhere on it. It's a medium heavy fast, so it's just a standard medium heavy fast taper rod. Do you guys know what that means? Fast, extra fast, moderate. I see some no's. Okay, I'm gonna explain that to you. I get to draw on the board now. So here's our fishing rod. That's extra fast. That's fast. That's moderate. And if they do one of these numbers, that's parabolic. So that refers to the amount of rod that's flexing. The less rod that flexes, in other words, if this rod rolls over from here to here, if it's 80-20, it's extra fast. That's a bottom bouncing rod for the most part. It's designed for bottom bouncing baits. Fast, this is your vanilla ice cream cone right here. You can put sprinkles on it, put some fudge dip on it, go to Dairy Queen, whatever you want, get on it. It's just good enough for everything. You can crank with this, you can jerkbait with this, you can spinnerbait with this, you can worm, you can jig. This is your do-all rod. And in jerkbait fishing, you want that little bit of flex. But you don't want to go to a crankbait rod to jerkbait fish because you have this whole midsection soft. It's just, there's not enough. Remember, what that bait is doing is, that jerkbait is doing the same thing that this fluke was doing. When we pop that jerkbait, he's going boom, boom. And you have to have a certain amount of stiffness in that rod to do that. And if you don't even listen to anything else I say, or remember anything else I say, remember how to fish a jerkbait and a fluke. These are weapons. Notice I haven't picked up anything that bounces off the bottom yet. There's no finesse.
Right.
We ain't doing that. We don't finesse fish in the fall,
Right.
unless it's a really bad day. And then I still don't finesse fish in the fall because I don't have paying customers on my boat. But I mean, if you got to catch a fish, you got to go finesse. I don't finesse fish. Okay, we're not going to be talking about finesse fishing. I don't ever finesse fish unless I am forced to. And there are days when I'm forced to, and it's usually extremely cold, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. I am a power fisherman because I am only fishing for the biggest fish that I can catch. I'm going to catch the reaction bite on the biggest fish. That topwater fishing that those guys were talking about with that walking bait in the shallowest water of the summer, I do that because not that that's going to produce my numbers, that's going to produce my size. Okay? I might fish 15 grass beds to get one bite, but it'll be a 20-plus inch fish. And once that happens, in the next 11 hours that I'm out, I'm going to fish 150 more grass beds until there's no gas left in the boat and there's no batteries left on the battery meter. But at the end of the day, when I come back into the ramp and we're telling fishing stories and I tell you I caught 15 fish over 4 pounds, you're going to be like, whoa, what a fish tail. Mm-mm. Power fishing will yield your biggest fish under most of your average conditions. Extreme conditions will call for finesse. But remember, let's back up a second. I said about my levels, most extreme to least extreme. If you do get on that school, you know, don't cut your nose off to spite your face. Pick up a spinning rod because your least aggressive bait that's going to refire that school is going to be maybe a tube, maybe a TRD. So you know, you're going to go from your most aggressive, and what's going to happen is on a school, a fall school, a big school, that's when you're going to catch the most fish. Then they're going to turn off. Then you're going to fire them back up with the next level, the jerkbait. Then they're going to turn off. Then you're going to fire them back up with the next level, the fluke. They're going to turn off quicker. They're getting smart. They're figuring it out. They're in 3 foot of water. 29 of their buddies just got ripped out of the water and came back in raising hell. You know? So then you will have to get the finesse rod out so you can catch 2 or 3 more fish. But remember, these fish that are on these shad, if you happen to find that holy grail and you see a pod of shad swimming, I followed them with my trolling motor already for like a mile. You know? And you'll just see fish blowing up on them. If you happen to find that, you know, and they'll hang in that area for a long time if you find them early in the fall. They're waiting for that water to get colder. That's their signal that we got to go to the ocean. We're running out of time. It's getting cold. But if it's early fall, like we're talking about here, it doesn't get cold right away usually. So they're gonna kind of hang in that area if they found and I found them already on flats that were so shallow that I had to pick my trolling motor up to drift across the flat. And then there's one rock, and over the years, that rock, the size of 2 of these boxes, the current washing out, coming over that rock and doing this back eddy, has dug a hole 2 feet deep, the size of this whiteboard. And every one of those fish is laying around that hole. And I mean, you catch one, and you look at, it's just this army coming at you, just exploding. All 3 of his buddies trying to take the bait out of his, and then that gets all the other ones fired up, and they chase that school of shad down. And that school of shad's trying to get out of here. They're going this way, and it's just a melee. That's it. That's what you're looking for. You found it. You don't have to look anymore, except for go find that again, and go find that again, and go find that again, and then you can rotate through them. Okay? And then the next few days, unless you have a major change, what you're going to find on your river app, they'll pretty much be in that area. Or if it gets real cold, then they got to head south. So, you know, our fall season in Dreamland is progressing along pretty nice. We're doing what we're talking about here. And our water's starting to get colder and colder and colder. Our techniques are going to need to change, and our locations are going to change. But let me harp on location with you, because you got to find them before you can catch them. If you want that knowledge of where to start looking, you've got to look at that app and see what that river's doing. And if it can be, the water temperature can be 33 degrees. And if that river is high, meaning 5 foot and over, those fish will be on the bank in an eddy, especially if the river's 6 or 7 or 8 at Harrisburg gauge. 5, the lower it is, the more scattered they are, the higher it is, the more predictable they are, and they will move. I mean, I've seen them move a half a mile in 4 hours, you know, on rising river. Lots of fish. So, you know, you're looking at your app and you're like, man, this river's been 5-1 all week. I'm going fishing tomorrow. Do you believe that? It's going to go up to 7-9. That's awesome. All those fish are going to go up on that bank, assuming that bank's not mud. Okay, you're going to have to eliminate water with your eyes. A lot of times as I'm running up the river, if I'm going from here to here, I'll go from here to here to here, and I'm just looking at water. This band's clean, this band's mixed, this band's out of the question. I just eliminated all that water. Now, if the shoreline is an island, that's still a shoreline. If the west bank of the river is mud and the east bank of the river is mud, then the center third or more is where all your fish are going to be. And they're not necessarily going to be in that cleanest water. A lot of times they prefer that mixed water. Okay, and they get very aggressive. Why is that important? Because unless it's really cold, like in the 30s, we don't want to use that spinning rod. We want to be fishing more aggressive baits. One of my best mid to late fall, and that can be water temperatures down to like 45 degrees, high water baits is a spinnerbait. Now keep in mind, the shad are bigger. I don't know what we got laying up here for spinnerbaits, but you all know what a spinnerbait looks like. So Here's a good way to illustrate my point. This blade right here, these are both size 4s. A 4 and a 4. This is a 4 and a 4.5. I'm going to choose the bigger blade in the higher, dirtier water. I'm gonna want that 4.5 or a 4.5, 4.5. Okay. I'm also going to up my size of my bait. These are 3/8. I'm going to go to a 1/2 ounce because I'm not going to be fishing this bait real fast, but I want to keep it down. I want it. My strike zone might be from the wall to me. That first crank, that cast is over. That's where the damage was going to be done. Okay, now, as the day goes on, those fish will get off of that real predictable eddy, and as the sun comes up, they'll move out, even in that colder water. They will be in, you'll hear guys saying, yeah, they were in the current. They were in the current. In the current means they're right on the seam. Like, here's the current. Here's the seam. And here's the slacker water. And it's in real cold water, you expect them here. But as the sun comes up, they'll slide out and get in the current. Okay, so, again, fish with an open mind. And that spinnerbait in the late fall on a high water is deadly. One of the, well, more than one of my greatest days ever in the fall has been spinnerbait in that kind of water. And a lot of times I'm going to darker baits. I'm fishing green pumpkins. I'm fishing black and blue. Okay? The water's dirtier. They offer a good silhouette. And I'm not a big trailer guy on my spinnerbaits, but a lot of times I'll put a chartreuse trailer on there to give a little contrast to that bait. Again, keep an open mind, experiment a little bit. Bigger tackle, okay? Bigger fish, bigger cover, bigger water, bigger tackle. You know, I'm going to the 7 foot. You know, I'm going to the 15 to 20 fluoro. 7 foot medium heavy to heavy. 7.71, 7.2 medium heavy to heavy. I'll fish anywhere from like a 6.2 to a 7.5 gear ratio. And, you know, have an outfit that you're proficient with, because the higher that water is, it's very, very critical to put that bait right in there. You know, like the old guide on Santee Cooper said, you got to put that bait between the bark and the tree. He wanted that in there tight, because that bait's got to get there and get through that strike zone. It can't land here. By the time it gets down, it's past that fish. Okay? Till you fish enough of that shoreline. And a lot of times what I'm going to do is, on a free-flowing part of the river, is I'm going to run up. I'm going to put my trolling motor down, and I'm going to fish like a half, 3/4 of a mile of water. That features anything from well-defined pockets to micro pockets to one-fish eddies. And again, I'm always listening and I'm always looking. If my boat's drifting down here, I'm on my trolling motor. Oh, there's a little island right there. Oh, that water's a little clear. I'm going to drop in behind that and try a few casts. And that spinnerbait allows you to do that quickly. My other main weaponry for that scenario is a ChatterBait. Okay? I know Corbin probably talked about chatterbaits till you couldn't stand to hear the word anymore. He's a very good chatterbait fisherman. But this is a year-round bait, except for your coldest of conditions. And it's a big fish bait. Okay? This will work late into the fall. But you got to have some higher water. The low clear water, not my first choice. Okay? We already talked about the low clear water in the fall. It's higher, a little bit dirtier. 2018 was a good year to experiment with high and dirty water. I mean, I think you'll all agree. I think the river was under 5 feet for 2 weeks, over 8 feet for the rest of them. Key to a chatterbait: dark blade, black or green pumpkin. Okay? There's only one time of the year that I really want to have a white chatterbait with a silver blade in my boat, and that's in the fall. Why? Because they're eating them big shad. But if you have a lot of high water, those shad are blown out, and they're going to be eating crayfish and other sticks and whatever else comes floating past their head. Dark blade, dark skirt, green pumpkin, black and blue, green pumpkin shad. If you want to focus in on a chatterbait for a second, probably the best thing I can tell you on a little sidebar here, assuming we have the colors understood there, the trailer makes all the difference in the world. This can completely change the effectiveness of this chatterbait. There's two types of trailers that you have to be good with for your chatterbait. The Swimbait and the crawl. The flapper. The flappity crawl. So we got a, here we go. See them claws on there? As that thing comes through the water, even when it falls, these claws are doing this. For some reason, there will be a couple times during the year where this will change. Usually, you're going to start out with the crawl style trailer. Then you're going to go to the Swimbait style trailer. Usually. That was not the case this year. And the way you can prove that to yourself is if you're fishing with a buddy. And I saw it twice this year. I saw it early when the Swimbait trailer outproduced the crawl trailer radically. And I saw it late when the crawl trailer outproduced the Swimbait trailer, when it should have been the other way around both times. And the other thing, and again, I don't really harp on color, but in June, May and June, those fish are feeding on crawfish. Your green pumpkin chatterbait with orange dye on the claws will blow your mind how big of a difference that can make. We're not talking about that time of the year, but I just had to throw that little nugget out there for you. So have yourself some orange spike it in your boat, and have yourself some green pumpkin, some chartreuse spike it in your boat. Because as we kind of transition through this later fall and into the early winter, we're going to start transitioning more into some finesse presentations. And color's going to matter. Why? Because winter water is extremely cold, and extremely cold water does not hold particles in it, and it gets extremely clear. Okay? So when we end this seminar in the dead of winter, which, I had good success up until the 7th of January, we're going to be dealing with the clearest, lowest, most finicky fish that there are. And we're going to have to go finesse. So a good transition bait from that late fall to early winter, something that I haven't talked to you about yet, is a Swimbait. Now, has anybody thought to themselves, this guy's using a lot of different lures? Has that thought occurred to anybody yet? The fall is the time of the year when you use a lot of different lures. We talked about the rattle trap, the lipless. We didn't even talk about the diver. Okay? That's a player in the fall. We talked about the hard jerkbait, the soft jerkbait. Yes, all three of those are year-round baits, but all three of those are key in the fall. We talked about the spinnerbait. We talked about the chatterbait. Well, that's 5 different rods we got strapped down on the front deck of the boat. We didn't even get into finesse yet. And part of finesse is the Swimbait. And your Swimbaits are going to vary. So remember, those shad are big. Okay? So until we get into that real cold water, we're not really interested in real small Swimbaits. This would be about as small as I'd be fishing in October and a lot of November. This is a 3.8 fat. Now, if it gets real cold on you, you're going to want to downsize. And I like my Kytex, as you might see, because everything I show you is going to be one. But I'm only critical on Kytex in real cold water. I'm not too critical on it in the summer months. I fish them, but I'm going to reach something a little more durable then. These are my cold water weapon, and I'm not a big scent guy except for a couple times of the year. I love the smell of squid in the morning.
Calamari.
I'm telling you, man. That's some good stuff right there. Really good when you have to bite them off, you know. Salt and squid. So, this is a 3.8, I mean a 4-inch swing impact from Kitech. I carry in my boat, you can't fit them all in that money bag. And I ain't lying to you. I use 100 packs of them a year. I fish them on a ball head jig. Let me dig one of them out of here for you real quick. Here's my 1/8 ounce bin. Okay. Does anybody have any bets on whether I dump my jig head box? Which, by the way, this is really the coolest jig head box I've ever owned, and it's that real heavy duty Bass Mafia box, which the box itself weighs like a pound. But you ever put like when this thing's at season level, there's 500 jig heads in here. That's a lot of weight. That deforms those plastic boxes, not this bad boy. And it's watertight, and I throw a pack of these bad boys in there. Those are those Flambeau tabs, Z rusts. That stuff works. Puts out some kind of odor or moisture eating molecule, I don't know. Anyways, so I fish a ball head. This is an old beat up one here. I fish a 3/0 hook, okay? That's very important on your ball head. And I fish 1/8 to 1/4. Some of your extreme conditions of higher water and extreme wind, you're going to need to go to like 1/4. And I'm going to fish this swim bait in the traditional swim bait manner, which is cast and slow retrieve. But where I really make my money on this bad boy is in that cold, that late fall, beginning of winter transition phase. You guys see how straight that's rigged up? There's no twist or curve in that at all. That you got to know. And if you don't know where to bring it out, lay it up alongside the jig head first and see where that hook wants to come out. You want that straight, because you're going to fish this on the bottom in that cold water like a jig. And this thing, you could put this thing in this bucket of water right here, and this tail would sit here and just move back and forth like that. And in that crystal clear, winter water, even in your slightly dirtier cold water, now that's where your color is going to come into play. I fish maybe 4 colors primarily. This is sungilt. Okay. That's going to be for my overcast days, my dingier water. And then I fish the flash colors. I fish bluegill flash, silver flash, and gold flash. And then they added in 40 other colors that kind of look all the same. So as long as you got something that's in that family. And all those flash colors are smoke based. Bluegill flash is like the lighter, gold flash is the darker, and the silver flash is in between. And you just got to kind of experiment with it. Unless the water's dingy, you go right to this bad boy. And that you'll pretty much will know quickly on your finesse fishing. One thing for you to remember, you will know quickly on your finesse fishing if you're using the right bait. You will get bit on your first, second, or third cast almost every time. You remember, you're around large schools of fish. A pocket the length of this room like this. I fished one this fall for 6 straight hours on one side of an island, the length of this room, maybe a little longer than this, for 6 hours. Power poled down in one spot without moving 3 guys in the boat, just wailing on them. Pick the power poles up, drift a half a boat length, put the power poles back down. All 6 hours. So there can be a lot of fish in those little pockets. The water was 4 feet deep, by the way. It's 4 feet deep. You could see the bottom in some places. We were fishing from here to that wall off the bank. Did it numerous times. So don't over or underestimate what's there. This river is so disgustingly polluted with fish that it's unbelievable. There is millions of them. They're everywhere. They're like fleas on a dog. Once you find them, you found them. And, you know, the #1 bait in your box is confidence. And if you can believe in yourself, you will catch so many more fish. You know, the negative force field just does not work. That negative guy that's fishing on your boat with you, who's not catching anything, and you're catching them, you just can't fix that. You just can't fix that. And you all, everybody laughing, they all got fishing buddies like that.
Yeah.
Oh, this ain't happening. This isn't happening here, man. This doesn't feel right. What do you mean it doesn't feel right? Been here 5 minutes. You know what I'm saying.
And what color is that guy?
That's sungill.
And you use that in darker water.
Dirtier, dingier, cloudy day in clear water. You know, and I'm in the fall. I'm in the late fall. Let's define late fall. So if the fall started at 65 degrees after that first major cold front comes out of the north with that big old wind, the late fall, you're going to be looking at water temperatures of like 45 and below. You're going to get up in the morning to go fishing, it's going to be in the 20s or the low 30s. It might heat up to 45 or 50. Earlier when I started talking, and I've done seminars forever, and I've said this so many times, and I can't stress it enough. It's the stable weather pattern. It's 3 days.
Yep.
It's 3 days. Guys will say, "What's the water temperature?" It's 42. Okay. The only reason that that's important to know is because what was it 3 days ago? Was it 38? Was it 39? Look at your weather. If the weather, like, here's a perfect example. It was 1 degree at my house this morning, okay? Tomorrow's going to be 45. Okay, that's day 1. Monday's going to be 53. That's day 2. Wednesday's going to be 58. That's the day you want to go fishing, okay? 3 stable or improving days. Whatever the water temperature is, it doesn't matter, as long as it either was the same or slightly improving. Where your water temperature gauge is important is when you're out on that day, okay? 1st of January this year. I always fish on January the 1st. Launched the boat, 40-mile-an-hour southwest winds. Weatherman was wrong, imagine that. Ran over to a big eddy. Never fished it before in my life, but we were talking about it on the way up the road, and it's got all the right attributes. Just drove past this thing like for 10 years. Drove past it in the boat, running from one area to another. Just a little skinny side eddy. But it's got 6 and 8 foot of water on it on an area that's not that deep. Got to check this out. So we pull in there, the wind's blowing right up on it. You got to go, the river's high. It's like 6.5, 7 foot at Harrisburg. You got to go downriver with your trolling motor. That's how hard the wind was blowing on a hard running river. And, you know, we caught a fish there. Okay, so that's water temperature. Okay. So we move to the west shore. Water's dirtier. Much dirtier. But the water temperature was like 5 degrees warmer. This could be something. You don't normally fish muddy water in the winter though, right? Fished a little bit, didn't get bit. Okay, let's go to the other side. Go over there. What's the water temperature? It's like 4 degrees warmer than where we were in the middle. So the banks are warmer, the middle's colder. Took about an hour, 3 stops, put it together, caught the heck out of them all day. What's the purpose of the story? I don't really care what the water temperature is. I care what it is that day. If the 3-day stability got me to 33 degrees, okay, 33 degrees it is. But if it's 34 here and 35 over there, and that's got my cleaner water, that's where I'm going. I eliminated, if the river's a mile wide and I'm catching, and that 35 is a quarter mile off the bank, I eliminated 3/4 of the river in 3 stops of the boat. Okay? You got one day. You gotta make some decisions. Use your eyes. Remember I told you running up the river, go like this, go like this. I'm looking at the water. I've already got my whole game plan laid out by the time I get up there where I need to be. And then I'm gonna roll from there. So, you know, just observe those things. So it's cold. You know, we're fishing our Kitech on the bottom. All right? The only real power technique that we're going to go to now, and I really want to go over this with you guys because it's probably the greatest ever for big fish, is yo-yoing my friend here, the Spro Uruku Shad. And I'll tell you, we've had a lot of fun together, me and Mr. Uruku Shad. I mean, we've had a time. So, what I'm doing is I'm casting this out. And here's why we like the Uruku Shad. This is how he stands on the bottom. On his nose. Sinks down through the water and stands on the bottom on his nose. And then when he sinks to the bottom, I watch my line. Dunk, I feel him hit the bottom. I see my line go slack. I pick up the line and I go. Brr, and I let him fall back down again. Pick it up. And then every now and again you go, oh, and there's a fish on there. It's either a rock or a fish. So, that's why we use this kind of a rod. Okay? We're not going to use anything stiffer or faster than a fast taper medium heavy graphite. So, you know, that might be like this 7-footer here, which would be this 843 Conquest. We're not using anything any stiffer or faster than that. From there to this, and this is a glass crankbait rod. This takes a little bit of a touch to get used to, but the rod goes to the fish, so you're like, yeah, that's a fish. He didn't drop it. A lot of times on that stiffer rod, you'll feel him quicker, but you'll also feel him actually drop the bait. You'll feel it drop. Whereas this one here, man, it's just like, I got you, sucker. And that's all Gamakatsus. Okay? That's another nice thing about buying a Spro Uruku. They're owned by the company that owns Gamakatsu. And Spro is one company. So guess what kind of hooks they put on their baits?
So do you modify that bait on your hook size?
No. I fish that out of the box. These things are what I would call a pro-tune bait. The other bait that I fish, and I'm all about yo-yoing a trap. I mean, I will yo-yo a trap from morning until night, from mid-November until Christmas, depending on my conditions. I don't find it very effective in the 30s. 45, 50, 50 down to 45 is sweet spot. 42 is awesome. 39. It'll be an afternoon deal. Okay? I got a couple of really exciting things I want to talk to you about yet in this, because now you're in my wheelhouse.
Yeah, is that the same thing?
Go ahead.
Is that,
Go ahead.
okay.
While you're on your jig, just go back one. Are you dragging that? Are you popping that? Doing
Dragging it.
Okay.
Dragging it. That's a very good question. He asked on this Kitech, am I dragging it? I'm popping it. I'm dragging it. I'm painting rocks. That's my term of the day for you. Painting rocks. I drag over that, into that crevice. Mike Wearsback in Oklahoma called it cracking.
Can you use a swing head too with that?
I wouldn't see why not. I like the ball head because a lot of the times that bite is so light. I'm not Texas rigged like I would be in a swing head, and and plus I like that current. I like that tracking in the current. You know what I'm saying? But I wouldn't see why not.
I was just gonna say, is that you could yo-yo that thing whether that water temperature's coming up or dropping, as
Yes.
long as it's in that temperature
Yes.
range.
Yeah, I mean, you can, when you're warmer than the mid-50s, cast and retrieve is going to work just as well. But when that water starts cooling off, and I'm telling you, you need to go out, and this is a good pre-spawn technique too, if the river clears up. A lot of times in March it's dirty, but if it's cleaner, March and April, this is money, man. You gotta devote yourself to learning this technique. Yes.
When you're in earlier fall, 65 to 55 or so, can you rip it out of the eelgrass?
Yeah.
Going it out of there?
Eelgrass is something that's been growing rapidly on the Susquehanna River. This year, obviously, we didn't have to contend with it much, but it's becoming a major fish attractant. Eelgrass is good. It filters the water. It provides cover for baitfish to grow up, a little fry to grow up. It also is an oxygen creator, and it's a great cover habitat for smallmouth. And that early fall, the gentleman was saying, a lot of times those fish are still on those shallow flats. The transition from late summer to early fall. Usually the rule of thumb is the hotter it gets, I call it the Labor Day pattern. It peaks at Labor Day. That's when they will be on the shallowest flats that you can find. 100 degrees. It's always like 98 or 100 on Labor Day. You know what I'm saying? That's when they'll be this shallow, and you can throw a topwater all day long and just destroy them. That stays until what I call the true fall, which is that big cold front 65-degree water. They stay on those flats, roaming, using eelgrass, and that bait is wonderful for that. As a matter of fact, when I usually go for it under that circumstances is when we get some rain and the river gets dirty. It might not be high, but it'll be dirty. And then if you recall, I mentioned to you a color called Magic Tiger. And I'm willing to bet in this mess up here of 10,000 lures. Oh, my boy Corbin left me down. So Magic Tiger. Oh, how many Magic Tiger? Magic Tiger's got some red, some green in it. You can see it out there on the spro wall.
It's like a fire tiger.
It's not. It's orange, red, and green.
Okay.
Like grass green. Gold, red, orange, bars. It's the Magic Tiger. And when the water's dirty on those eelgrass flats, it is straight up money. And, on the upper river, for those of you who don't fish on the upper river, that time of year, the flats, I keep saying flats. I mean long, no ledges, flats, gravel, bars. I mean, it's not uncommon on a topwater bite to have them track your bait as it's coming through the air and see them putting V-wakes out. It's so shallow. Coming to intercept that thing as it's landing. Shallow. Like you can't put your trolling motor down shallow. You're hitting all the time shallow.
And that's good in the summer?
The hotter the better. The hotter the river gets, the shallower the smallmouth go. Remember this. Take and go to Vegas and put this down. It's probably in the sports book. As it gets hotter, they get shallower. They're shallower in August than they are in June.
I thought they would head out of that house.
No. They want to be up shallow. Because that's where everything they eat is.
What about on the impoundments?
Okay. Gentleman asked about the impoundments. Pretty much forget everything I just said. Seriously. The best way to think of an impoundment is you have to have current for any of this stuff to work. They'll get shallow, but only with current. If the dam's running, pulling,
Right.
running in, flow. You notice flow. You have to have that flow on the impoundments. In the early fall, on the impoundments, like the month of August, late or September. I don't know. There's no delicate way to put this. That's probably the worst month of the year to fish the impoundments, if there's no flow. Whereas upriver, it's like scratch off, hitting scratch offs, man. It's just awesome. But we have constant flow. We have a natural flowing river. We just get more or less of it.
What's Impoundment?
This Safe Harbor Dam, Long Level, Conowingo Pool, the Holtwood Dam, Peckway, Lake Frederick at Goldsboro. Goldsboro does have a standard current flowing through it though, so it's a little less. It's on the it hovers between impoundment and free flow. The bottom three are completely current is completely regulated by dams. When the dam's on, the fish are on. When the dam's off, the fish are off. If the water's low. If the water's high, like this year, they never turn the dam off. So you had current, you know, it's not 100%. But if it's a low, normal summer, September is not a fun time to be fishing on impoundments if there's not water flowing. It can be stingy. Plus, find the bait. Go to Conowingo when it's low in September and see if you can find the bait. The school of shad dimpling the surface is a half a mile wide and a mile and a half long. And if you close your eyes, it sounds like it's raining. There's that many shad dimpling the surface. You found the bait. Now you're going to throw this rattle trap. I didn't even need to finish my sentence, do I? Here's your shad. We're fishing above billions of shad. That's a tough one. If you can find them, that is a hot pattern, is a lipless rattle trap in September on them massive mega shad schools. The other thing about those impoundment fish, they go the way the shad go, and the shad go the way the plankton go, and the plankton go the way the wind go. So if the wind's been blowing for 2 days from the east, you better be on the west, because all the groceries are. Okay? That's a great topic, Sam. And a little later on this year, we're going to actually do another seminar night, and we're going to talk about nothing but impoundments. From our river impoundments to our lakes to some of the destinations that we can get to within a few hours drive of here. Because that's a whole different animal. As you well know, you spend as much time as anybody I know on Conowingo Pool.
Yeah.
So dam's considered an impoundment.
It's a river-run lake. They build a dam, it stops the river. It forms a lake. It's a river-run lake. They turn the dam on, the current goes.
Okay.
Now at the top of that, like here at Long Level at Columbia, there's current coming in there. Because it's coming down the river. Because it's a long way to the next dam. So you have a natural flowing river in there. I mean, it might not be a purest natural. I mean, there's a dam above it. Many miles. You have flow. So there you can fish it like what we're talking about. But if it's September and the river gauge at Harrisburg is 3.2 and it's 98 degrees out, and the mayflies are hatching, you might want to go to Columbia in the evening, because that's when the dam will be running to make power, because that's when the demand is the highest, because everybody comes home from work, cranks the air conditioners up. They turn the dam on for a couple hours, and all of a sudden you'll see the water start moving. And I've done it many a time. You know, boat ramp's 5 minutes from here. I bring my boat to work all the time, jet boat. 5 o'clock, I'm like, see you boys, have fun. Get down, throw the boat in the water when it's super low. Just fish down through there, waiting for them to turn the dam on. When they turn the dam on, man, it's just like popcorn till it gets dark, you know? So, anyways, good questions.
What about wind movement? Obviously, it doesn't affect too far down the water line. But
Well, that's a super smart question, and I have a lot of answers on that one. Wind movement, wind current. So in a reservoir, like Sam's talking about, when they're not running the dam, the wind can generate current enough to stimulate the bite. But upriver, the wind has a major effect on current. You hear a lot of people complaining about their day. It was a south wind. How was the fishing? Oh, I didn't do any good. It was a south wind. Well, first of all, somebody did good that day. It just wasn't you. Second of all, I agree. A south wind can be detrimental because it can stall the current. Okay? So that's kind of like turning the dam off. But there's also benefits to a south wind. You need to be looking at a place where that wind is being squeezed through an area. Yeah, it's next down. So if there's a grass bed island here and a grass bed island here, and this south wind is huffing, and that water's getting pushed, and it's next down to fit between here, that's feeding lane. So you need to use that wind to your advantage. You have to fish the conditions. How many times today have I said fish the conditions? What's the sky color? What's the water color? What's the water color over here? What's the water color over here? What's the river doing? Is it going up? Is it coming down? You know, this year with all the high water, I mean, it'd take me 30 minutes to figure out where I was going fishing. I get on my phone here and I'll be like, well, let's see. I got to check the Harrisburg gauge. I got to check the Conneaut gauge. I got to check the Sherman's Creek gauge. I got to check the Penns Creek gauge. I got to check the Swatty gauge. I got to check the Lewisburg gauge. I got to check the West Milton gauge and the Sunbury gauge to figure out where I can fish and where I should fish, because it was such a high, crazy river, you know. That's a little extreme, but I don't go fishing without checking those gauges. I've said it at least 3 times so far today. At least 3 times. The weather and the gauges. It's just like when I fish tidal water on the upper Bay or the Potomac. The tide chart and the weather. I don't go fishing until I know exactly what the tide's going to do everywhere I'm going to go fishing all day long. Why? You know? Why would you not plan your day accordingly? So those are great questions, and I don't want to take too much more of your time, but I do want to talk a little bit more about some of these really cold hard bait techniques. And my next technique that I'm going to talk to you about is a technique I call long lining. So long lining is a jerkbait technique for extremely cold water. So I'm going to figure out where my ledges are. I can't see them, they're underwater. I'm going to read the water. I'm going to use my electronics. I'm going to figure out my ledges.
Look out.
We got ledge down. Just like it. So what I'm doing is I'm looking for a break in this ledge. So if this is a ledge, this whole row of cabinets here, Sam and Matt are sitting in the break. They're the fish. I'm going to be up here and over here a little bit. And I'm going to cast my jerkbait straight out the side of the boat and maybe even down a little bit. I'm going to give it a big long rip to get it down. And then I'm going to stand there and I'm going to pop, pop. This is one of them times when you want to get out this tackle box. Because you're going to need a cigar for this technique. Because it's slow. So you fire up your stick, and you're like, doom, doom. Doom, doom. Now that bait's behind you. High percentage zone is when it swings in front of that ledge. Next thing I'm going to do, push the button, pull up 5 feet of line, let it drop back. Now I'm in the slot. Boom, boom. Just hanging it in front of their face. And they're migrating through there. They're moving through there. That's a pinch point. And when you get it all timed out right, get your boat position right, set your spot lock on your trolling motor. If you're deeper than power pole down, set an anchor, wherever you got to do. They can be magical. In that cold water, doom, doom. Just, they can't take it. All of a sudden, it's just and it's a giant. And I mean, there's guys out here that have fished with me in the fall already, where we've had 3 guys on the boat and we've caught 140 fish off of one of them spots. Until we couldn't stand it and actually left and went somewhere else to try to catch them where it was harder. There was that many fish migrating through there in the fall. And that's what you're looking for. You're looking for the holy grail, you know? So keep looking, keep thinking. Okay, you got to think about these techniques here. We're going from the most aggressive to the least aggressive. We're looking for shad. Always. Especially now that they're stocking these big herring and, I mean, these shad are this big. They eat them, man. You catch a smallmouth with a tail like that sticking up out of his gullet. And he ate a dadgum topwater half again as long as that. You know? Spinnerbait 3/4 ounce with big double willows. You know? The shad, the groceries, that's what you're looking for. Then as the water cools, the fish will start to school more. And then as the water gets real cold, unless it's high, right? We talked about it being high like this year. They didn't really go into wintering areas. Traditional. So that leads to the river gauge. We're not going to go through that again. I know I wore you out on that one. You know, a wintering hole can be 5 foot deep on the bank. You know? Or it could be 12 foot deep between 2 ledges in the middle of the river. Everybody's driven up and down past the Statue of Liberty when it's low and clear and seen 60 boats out there fishing on the weekend. That might be a wintering hole. But there's tons of them. Some of the wintering holes that I fish are that big. You know? Jimmy Arnold's out there helping us today. Ask him about our trip last spring to a wintering hole in February, early March. I mean, we were power poled down for 6 hours cast into the same rock. It was stupid. That's what you're looking for. You got to keep looking. Because that's, if you catch one and there's 4 with it, you found them. They're there. They're all there. When their buddies are with them, that is a school of fish. They are there. They are not leaving until something radical happens to their environment. So we talked about that. We talked about the lipless baits. We talked about the importance of the nose down attitude. This is my TN70 from Jackal. It's got a tungsten mouth on it. No doubt the way that's going down. That goes down, stands on the bottom like that. I mean, it almost sits like that in the box. Okay? We talked about the importance of that when you're yo-yoing. We talked about colors a little bit. We didn't really get into the whole color kaleidoscope. But in that late fall, early winter, color is critical. Super sunny, super clear. You want a ghost style color on your jerk baits and your lipless baits. A ghost, a translucent. Super sunny, super clear. Super clear and cloudy. Just remember you want a painted bait. Painted bait. So you want painted, opaque. Okay? In a jerkbait, ghost minnow for a sunny day, chartreuse shad for a cloudy day. In between there, you want what I would call a shiny clear bait. So that's going to be a clear, shiny, halftone. Top half shiny, bottom half clear, halftone, HT.
And what days you use that on?
This is all around. This is an all around. Also in real clear water. Real cold water. Okay? You want to go to colors like that. sunny, even a cloudy day, because it's got a little bit of both. But a cold water, this thing will suspend like a dart sticking in a cork of a dartboard. Okay, when it's tough jerkbait bite and somebody's catching giants, they're using mega bass. Enough said on that. That box is nothing but mega bass. Okay, we talked about that. We talked about the swim bait. We talked about sometimes we do have to finesse. Okay, we talked about that in cold water. What else did we talk about finesse for? The last technique to fire up a school. Least aggressive. The little tube, and of course the Ned rig, which is, I'm sure Corbin talked to you about Ned rigs till you couldn't stand to hear the word again. That thing will flat out catch them. Last but not least, one of the forgotten beauties of the cold water winter period. The old silver buddy. That one there has been doctored up. Hit my rod. This is how they come out of the box. Standard issue silver buddy. Doesn't look all that sexy compared to all them other fancy lures we were catching. But this will flat out smoke them. So cold water. This is a winter bait. Okay? We're going to fish this in the winter. Low 40s, preferably in the 30s. We are going to fish that on a spinning rod. Our 7'2" medium with 8-pound fluorocarbon. And you're going to fish it a lot like you would fish a TRD or a net or so. You're going to let it sink to the bottom, and then you're just simply going to and let it fall. Just like fishing that rattle trap, only a little more subtle. And you pick up, and there he is. When they get on that bait, it's lethal. So when I'm winter fishing, like December, January, when it's winter and the water's in the 30s, the best you can hope for is 40. I got a lot of spinning rods on the deck. I've got a Ned head, and I can quickly change my tails on this. This last day that I fished, the 7th, this side of the river was dirty. I had to fish black. In the middle, they wouldn't touch black. I had to fish the deal. So I just kept them laying on the carpet there, and just every time we'd go from one side to the other, I'd change them out. I only fish the weedless head. I don't ever fish anything but the weedless Ned head. I like to get down there amongst them, and getting snagged every cast doesn't appeal to me too much. So that's the Ned. And then the tube. 2.5 inch. The only difference on the tube, the only thing I can really tell you on the tube, now this is for winter, guys and girls. I don't know. I just kind of grabbed my little winter bag that I've been fishing out of the last couple weeks. Yeah, here we go. So here's the deal with the tube. There's a big difference in those two tubes right there. This is a chunkier, thicker tube than this, has a more slender profile. I know you're not going to believe me, but there's a difference. And there can be a difference. Usually, the clearer the water, the more important it is to go to that real skinny. This body's double dipped. This body here is double dipped, but with a ton more salt in the outer coating, so it gets real thick. You can see the thickness difference there. This is a much more supple, quiet tube in real cold, clear water. Generally, this will outfish this, but not always. So I always carry green pumpkin in that tube, and then I always carry, for clear water on a sunny day, I always carry smoked purple. And I don't carry anything else. Now in that chunkier tube, I carry a few more colors because I'm using that in my dirtier water. And of course we got to practice in the dirtier water this year. And this tube didn't even play this year with the higher, dirtier water conditions. This tube didn't even play. I normally go through 100 of them things in the fall and winter, late fall and winter.
Was it smoke purple?
Smoke purple. Yep, dirty dark green pumpkin and smoke purple. This year we fished the Mismos and the right bites, the fatter little tubes. Green pumpkin purple. Green pumpkin, smoke purple tail. Green pumpkin tail, melon purple body. That was hot. We caught a truckload of fish on that thing. Spike in the tail and black with red flake.
What color spike did you use?
Chartreuse. Only orange in like the spring.
Okay.
June, you can leave the chartreuse at home. And then of course all the TRD stuff. And I'm sure Corbin and them talked about that pretty good. So so you're gonna have your Kitech swim bait on your jig head, or your little jackal. That's also a squid scented bait. That little jackal 2.8. You're gonna have your TRD. You're gonna have your tube. Those 3 spinning rods. You're gonna have your silver buddy. Okay. And then the last, and this used to be the first line of defense, and now it's become the last line of defense. And I bet you I didn't catch 3 fish on this all year. Hair jig. That used to be the go-to in cold water. Now we don't even hardly catch fish on it anymore. It has a time. It has a place. I carry that box with me all winter long.
Why do you think that is?
I think that TRD and the advent of the small tubes and the right colors just out triggers the fish to that hair jig. And I mean, I fish a hair jig every fishing trip I go on when the water's in the 30s. And I don't just make one cast with it. I carry a whole rod rigged up with a hair jig. It's actually my drop shot rod. And I fish it on 6-pound test. It's another thing about your winter, when that water gets low and clear, 6-pound test fluorocarbon, whether it's your leader or your main line. I fish the high seas almost exclusively. I've gone through a lot of fluoros, and there's a lot of good fluoros on the market. This stuff is bulletproof. I mean, it is straight up bulletproof. So, little recap. Kind of touched on a lot of stuff here. Covered a lot of turf, a lot more than I really wanted to, but it's a big topic. Any other questions?
George, when you're identifying these ledges,
Yeah.
say I put in a Goldsboro and I run up north,
Mm-hmm.
right there by the marina where it gets hairy when the
Mhm.
water's low. Are you considering like that a ledge up at the top
A ledge is a row of rocks.
that you're actually going to see?
Well, you might not see them. You might only see the ripples or the swirls.
Right.
But if you look at a big open expanse of water, and if you take that row of shelves that you're leaned up against, and that was an underwater ledge, and that water was flowing down through there, it'd be smooth, and then there'd be a whole row of riffles going the whole ways across the river. A perfect example close by here of what river ledges look like is go down to Columbia in the river park and look down the river at all them rocks sticking out of the water. And then go down to where you're at the rocks and look at them. This is a row, then there's a trough between them. Then a row of rocks and a trough between them. Ledge, trough, ledge, trough. Now, in September and early October, when those fish are skinny and flat on them flats, some of the ledges I fish are this tall. It's a big giant flat with a ledge this tall. That's all the taller the ledge is. And you can get your boat on top of it and look at it, and you're like, yeah, that's a ledge. And a lot of the ledges don't run straight across the river, they run across on an angle. Some of the ledges run like this, but most of them run like that. And think about it, it's a form of cover. If you have a great big flat with a row of rocks going across it, now, the big, well-defined ledges come into play, you know, early and late. They're not really the happening deal in September, for example. Those fish tend to be more flat oriented. But you can't ever rule anything out. And there's a science to fishing ledges when fish are on ledges. Whether you can see the ledge or not, if you're reading the water, you're technically seeing the ledge. And try it. Try using your trolling motor in a free-flowing river to work from one side of the river to the other on one ledge. First of all, you're going to be on your trolling motor nonstop the entire time. And you're going to be crabbing across the river. You're going to boom, 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 boom. Now you have to locate how the fish are positioned on the ledge. Are they in front of the ledge? Are they behind the ledge? Or are they on top of the ledge? How many people, show of hands, know what a push is in river current?
It's right in front of the ledge.
Exactly. So if this is a rock this big on the bottom of the river, and the current's coming down through here, there will be a current break right here. There will be no current right here. That is the push. That's where the big boy lives, El Jefe. That's his main turf right there. Then the current's going to do this, and this, and this. You got fish locations, fish locations, fish locations. I once saw 5 fish on my down imaging hovering around a rock with a school of shad at long level on a tough fall day in a club tournament. There they are. Took my Colt O-angler off the back deck. I said, you got to see this. Because he was learning, didn't know electronics. I'm like, those are 5 fish. Those are shad. A couple minutes later, there was current running. It was the first time of the day the current was moving. We got back on top of that. This was in about 12 foot of water. Those fish went to here, and those shad went to here. And if you looked at the fish on the finder, you could see the current, because they were the current. They were on that seam, that invisible seam. And that transducer was on the back of my boat, and I was looking at my front unit. I had my front unit turned onto my back transducer, down imaging 5 fish, lined them up with a stump on the bank, and I caught all 5 of them fish on that Kitech and bluegill flash. Like drifting back over top of that rock and getting on top of them. They wouldn't have bit without that water turning on. And we watched them. We watched them reposition on the graph. It was the freaking coolest thing ever. So that is what a ledge does. It positions fish. So you got to know what a push is. A grass bed, when the river's 5 foot and the water's flowing through the grass, best grass beds have the water flowing through the grass. Look for the water flowing through the grass. That's where the big boy lives. Okay? Yes?
I ran into that scenario this early fall and was trying to figure out what best bait to throw into it without getting snagged in that high grass.
In the grass. The water willow. Yeah, that water willow is mean stuff. It's got a stalk like bamboo. If you hang it, you got to go get it.
Right.
Especially if it's like a expensive ChatterBait or something. But your ChatterBait, I would say, is tied for first with a spinnerbait. And then, depending on your water temperature, if it was not too cold, if it was like early fall, a wake bait. Okay, so a wake bait is a crankbait that doesn't dive down more than that far below the surface, or even a little deeper, but if you hold your rod down or up, you can control it a little bit. And it's big and round, and it produces a lot of movement. Here's the one I really want to show you. See that little squatty lip on there? That's a baby 1-. That's phenomenal in that grass. And you see that big round profile? We call that an alphabet plug. Rolls, moves a lot of water. So that's your grass, your water throwing through your grass like you were asking me about. ChatterBait, spinnerbait, wakebait. Try it.
You go right through the grass?
Well, you're looking for, like if the grass bed is here, and there's a little tuft of grass here, if you look along that grass, you'll see an eddy formed.
Yeah.
Okay? Right in front of that's going to be a little push. Eddy, eddy, eddy. It might be a one fish eddy. So you want to make that cast a little up past that, bring it right down that seam. Remember I said earlier about spinnerbait fishing on the high water on the bank? Get a good bait casting rod and reel that you're proficient with. Okay, because if you can't put that bait right here, if this is the bank, if you're landing here, and those fish are tight, by the time you get into the strike zone, you're past the fish. And that guy that's fishing behind you that's putting that spinnerbait right there every time, when you're fishing that grass, man, it's there. If you're 3 feet out here in the open water, that fish is not coming out for that bait. You're going to make him eat the bait. He is going to react to it. He can have 5 of them shads sticking out of his gills and his throat and everything else. He'll eat that bait. All right. I told you. You know,
go like this, wind it up.
great questions. Really appreciate you guys sitting in on my seminar. I love talking fishing. You can stop in the shop anytime and we can talk fishing all day. Thank you very, very much.
One more door prize drawing before we're done.
One more door prize drawing.
So don't take off right away.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks, George.
Thank you. Thank you.